Yo and hello everybody. Mike here, baseball collector. I've got my buddy Andy with me tonight. Andy, are you over the national hangover or do you still have it?
It's like a week-long hangover. It's like one of those college hangovers that just lingers. I think the last couple days I don't have the illness, but I feel I'm a little stopped up and like most people, I think my voice was just shot from blabbering too much at the show. But I'm getting back to some normalcy. How about yourself?
Same. Voice is recovering. Although my job is to be on the phone all day, so I've been and talking to people, meeting with people. So
Yeah.
it's been a little bit of a struggle, and I've had long days at work, but all good. I'm
Yeah.
I'm back at it.
Work calls are probably less exciting though than oh, look at that card this guy got, or you know.
People calling me, Mike, I found your grail or whatever.
Yeah.
I do. By Saturday when we leave, I'm done with cards. I've had enough.
I
And
agree. It's a lot to take in.
there's a lot of our friends that don't feel that way, and more power to them. But we left even an hour or two before we even had to, just because I'm done. We can go, and took our time getting to the airport and all of that. We both made it home, obviously, no issues, which was a pleasant surprise.
I mean, it was nice. I mean, the last time we went to Ohio, my trip back was a little
More hairy.
less fortunate, but I made it both times. So.
Who greeted you at the truck when Julie picked us up?
Norman
and Claire.
Yeah, but Norman's still old. He's the old school guy. Me and Claire are just getting to know each other. Me and Norm are like best buds. Yeah, there we go.
My favorite pickup from the show.
Yeah,
that was actually a pretty clever idea. Like our buddy Eric said, Tag may have found their niche. They just make custom cards.
I think that could be true. Like, I know a lot of people. I remember back when people were saying that about HGA. Like, why don't they just scrap the grading and just create these cool custom slabs for people's cards? And that's, in a roundabout way, that's kind of what Tag has done here. I mean, it's in a slab, but it's not. These cards are not they don't really grade these.
Yeah, it's mildly expensive. $40 is, I would only do that at the show. Just I could think of a lot worse things to spend $40 on, but.
Yeah, I mean, some of these custom cards though that people make, man, they're not cheap.
Yeah,
they sell for a lot of money. So
that's true.
It's an interesting concept. I was glad to see that because I mean, I had no intentions of. I mean, I hadn't even thought about Tag heading into the national, and I thought it was a really cool thing. So props to them for doing that.
That's a great point. Well, speaking of the national, this is kind of going to be my last word on a lot of things that we observed, and I want to go through some things because what my goal would be at the end of this discussion is for you and I to put out into the world some solutions for the national to consider on how to improve the experience at the show. Right?
Okay.
I'm not here to poo-poo on what happened. It's past. I can't change it. Yelling at them or bitching about it will not do any good. And I want to try to stay okay, here was an issue that we observed. How can that be better in future nationals?
Yeah.
And to me, it comes down to two major things, which we're going to go to in depth. Number one, the city that you choose to host the national. And number two, the venue within the city that you choose to host the national. I think those are two super critical, hypercritical things that if you don't get those right, it trickles down it kind of into everything else. I think we can all agree, and you may disagree. We'll find out in just a second. Atlantic City, once you were inside, not so bad. Cleveland, once you were inside, I heard a lot of people praising the layout and enjoying the simplicity of it, of the layout. It's never really a problem in terms of layout, I guess. There are issues inside, which we'll get to in a minute. But what's good about your perspective, Annie, what I like about your perspective is even though we room together and we're with each other every day, you and I get to the show and we split almost immediately, not because we don't like each other, but just because, you go do your thing and I go do my thing. We don't even talk about it. It's no big deal.
Right.
And then, hey, I'll see you when I see you, because I know I'm going to be with you in the evenings and all that. So we don't have to be with each. And so we get to see a lot of, it's two different sets of eyes seeing things independently.
Yeah.
Right. So, and having different experiences moment by moment. So let's first talk about the city. What would you say a city needs to have to be, and we're all going to say Chicago. So let's table that idea, but let's just think about a city. What things can a city have and provide that make a national really special?
Well, I mean, I think that because a lot of people they use this as a vacation. They're having to take time off of work, and sometimes people bring their families. So I would think the city, you would want to have stuff outside of the show that would be appealing to not only, like the person who is going for the show, but for maybe their family members, whoever comes with them that's not as into the show itself. It would be like it just gives them more of a reason to go, I guess you might say. And as far as do you want to talk about the venue yet, or just?
So I think having obviously an airport that can handle
Sure.
have flights, right? A major airport. I agree with you on major attractions outside of the show to entice a dad that wants to bring his family on, or or a woman, I guess, either way. But someone wanting to come to the show for 1, 2, 3 days, and while they're gone, their significant other and kids are not bored out of their gourd, right?
Right. Yeah.
That they can have things to do, whether it's theme parks, beaches, museums, zoos. Obviously, I think having it in a major league city in the summer is smart, so that because in Cleveland, the Guardians were in town. If you wanted to drive 3 hours to Pittsburgh, you could. They were in town early in the week. The Pro Football Hall of Fame is not far. You had the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but that's about that. Like, you can go to the house from A Christmas Story, but after that, there isn't a whole lot there to do. And then you want within the city a venue that is directly attached or close to, literally walking. It has to be walking distance. We'll get to that, to the hotels, to places to eat, and have ample opportunities for that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
I agree. And I think it's not that there's nothing to do in Cleveland, but when you go on a vacation, you're looking to do things that you can't do at home. You know what I mean? Like there's plenty of stuff to do there, but how many unique things are there that you just can't, you can't do in the city that you live in?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And where I think the conclusion we're going to get to is there's really only a few cities in the US that are capable of providing all of these things that we think kind of the perfect national should have. And that's kind of what we're creating here with these suggestions is here's kind of ideal. And then where is the ideal? Does the ideal even exist? And it may not, and we may have to just shrug our shoulders and do the best we can with the tools we have.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the venue itself, because I think that's where we're going to spend a bulk of this discussion. What were some areas that you saw observing yourself firsthand in Cleveland that made you just shake your head and go, how can this be this way?
Well, I mean, some of it's not necessarily it's not the fault of the venue, but just like the breakers area. I mean, I just always think that's a little bit over the top and crazy and loud. The bathroom thing, everybody's going to talk about the bathroom situation. And that's it's not something that you can fix as far as the venue itself. It's just, maybe you should pick somewhere different as far as a venue, because that was That was an utter disaster.
Let's talk about the bathrooms, because I think it's challenge. I've been kind of stewing on this. When you have an event like the National, which is going to be 95% plus men,
Yes.
you have to, and you're talking about tens of thousands of people in the hall, in the show hall at any given time.
Yeah.
Perhaps 30,000-40,000 people at a time in the show, with most of those being men.
Yeah.
You should go, you know what? We better make sure we have 95% of the bathrooms available are for men. And a way I thought that they could have solved that, think about this, Andy. We saw long lines, and that'll be another topic, but we saw long lines all the time.
Right.
Not in the bathrooms, but even outside waiting to get into the show. If you had a row of just porta potties, which sounds gross and whatever, look, I'm a dude. I don't care. I need a hole to piss in, right? And I don't need it to be fancy. And truthfully, those bathrooms weren't much better than a porta potty to begin with. So if they have that outside, so that a bunch of the people waiting in line outside could, hey, like if you and I were standing in line together, hey, Andy, hold our spot. I'm going to run and use the bathroom. Then you alleviate some of that pressure on the bathrooms on the inside. You can't put them around on the inside, but you can certainly put them outside. Or if you're leaving the show and you're like, God, I got to piss, but I don't want to do it in there, I'm going to run. When we go outside, I can just go out to one of the 30 or 40 or 50 porta potties that they have lined up. Granted, not the most aesthetically pleasing sight and or smell. I'm not saying it's an ideal solution, but to me, it takes the pressure off people needing to rush inside and head straight to the restroom to wait for upwards of an hour to use the bathroom, when they could do it outside really quick. So to me, that's a possible solution for venues that just don't have, but just think about it. I mean, it's like someone didn't think of it, and that doesn't make any sense to me when you know you're going to have this many people. You've sold X number of tickets, whatever, right? You know, this isn't surprising. They didn't go, oh man, I didn't know this many people would show up. I mean, come on.
I mean, it shouldn't have been surprising. I mean, because they they see how many tickets they've sold. They should know. The porta potty idea, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. Would it have been better than what was there? I think so, but at the same time, like I don't know. I'm not sure how the optics of that would look like, because you're already asking people to, in a lot of cases, travel all the way across the country, spend thousands of dollars between, your airfare, hotels, and whatever you're buying there. And then you're going to ask them to use porta potties. I mean, it just doesn't seem, this is already like not like a super classy event anyway, but it like even lowers it a little bit, right?
I don't disagree, but isn't that solution better than what ended up happening? And
Oh, I agree it's better, but I mean, like, I think the conclusion I think that I come to when we talk about this is like that facility is just not equipped to hold this event anymore.
No doubt. But we've seen long lines in previous nationals that we've been to, people waiting in staging areas, essentially. In the last three nationals, even Chicago, Atlantic City, and Cleveland, there's these staging areas where they put people to let them into the show. And my solution that I kind of brainstormed is you have tiered let-in times, which is nobody wants that. But there are plenty of people that, if you said you can pay a little bit more and get in it, there's already early access, right? And you limit that to a certain number of people. And then you have a 10 o'clock get in and an 11 o'clock get in. And you start, look, none of these are perfect ideas, by the way. I'm kind of just throwing these out, that you spread out the rush and it makes the holding areas less necessary. Some people may say, I don't mind getting there at 11, no big deal. And I'll be there till 6 or whenever it closes, no problem. That's plenty of time for me. Not everybody is mad fanatic like JT or Eric, our friends that have to be there, pretty much every minute because they don't want to miss anything. You and I are certainly not like that. I'd rather get there early and leave early, right?
Yeah, I think where I would go with that problem, as far as like just the crowd getting in, why not open up that back entrance? Like,
Bingo.
there's 2 entrances into that building. So why would you not have both of them open when you're having a crowd like that, where people are literally 1,000 deep? I mean, it's unbelievable how long people had to wait just to get in the dang thing. It's crazy.
Totally logical answer. Why not have, and not just 2 entrances? Why not have 4 entrances to get in where people can go and get in, walk in the show? Why does it have to be this choke point of both traffic, which we saw abundant evidence of people coming in? There's basically essentially one way to get into the parking lot. There were 2, they opened up the other one, but then you had to walk all the way around the bloody building because the other entrance wasn't open, like you said. So you got to have multiple entry points, and a person can go in any of those, right? If you're wearing your 5-day early access badge or whatever, you can go into any of them. It's fine. And that way you alleviate a lot of this choke point problem that we saw manifest itself in Cleveland.
I could be wrong on this, but I had people tell me this before, and you may know, but I think at past nationals there, I'm pretty sure they had those entrances open, right?
It was.
So why, when this is going to be by far the biggest one they have ever hosted there, as far as attendance wise, why would you only have 1?
Yeah. So for future nationals, Joe Drellick, if you're watching, multiple entry points for people to come into the building so that you can, and that's not great at Rosemont either, by the way. We know this, that even Chicago has that problem, and that there's typically only 1 entrance. Well, why not make it more? You can give people opportunities to get in from different points of the convention center. That would just make sense, just in general, as a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. Food, man. So at the very beginning of the week, I was like, oh man, look at all these food options. Well, that was easy when it was you, me, and a few dealers in the room, right? I thought, wow, there's a lot of choices. The reality was, for that many people, there were very few choices. There was, I think, a total of 6 food trucks in the entire building, or stations, to be able to get food. And for, again, 30, 40, 50,000 people, noon gets really crowded, or lunchtime looks disastrous. How do you solve that problem? Make that better.
Well, I mean, I don't know where they would set up more food vendors inside of that place. Because, I mean, although there was the aisles and everything, they were more roomy than what it is in Rosemont, but I didn't see a ton of it wasn't like there was a lot of open space just not being used. So I don't know about that. I'm not sure what you do there.
Again, we're trying to solve the problem inside, and I think the problem can be solved outside. I've been to we've all been to festivals and things. You could put food trucks outside and line up 12 more food trucks outside that are convenient to the entrances for people. And then what that does is it gets people off the floor and makes that less crowded, right? And here's the bottom line: more space is needed, period. For all of this stuff to work right, to dilute the crowds, you have to have more space, more even maybe than the Rosemont Center, or at least they've been so resistant to use multiple floors for the actual show itself. This year we saw a bunch of stuff downstairs. In fact, if you never went downstairs, there was a whole nother show going on down there with kids set up. There were tons and tons of tables, places to sit down there, and guys were setting up. It looked like a trade night all day downstairs.
Yeah, and oddly enough, I didn't know that was there until the whole thing was over. Like I had no clue that was even down there. So, and that's another thing. If you just want to kind of nitpick a little bit on some of the stuff, like their communication on stuff is not exactly what I would call great. I mean, like I was there the whole week, didn't even know that this place existed down there.
Yeah. But you could put food trucks down, or you could put food kiosks down there too, right? And
Sure.
again, it's about maneuvering the crowds, giving them multiple places to go to spread it out and having space to do that. And down there were all those like that would be for like a food court, that would have been an idyllic setup for that. And then there were all these ballrooms and things that, you know, so much of the space was underutilized or improperly utilized. They were so focused on the main level that they didn't think outside the box to where can we put X, Y, and Z to make this a little bit better. So foods, obviously, you need to have multiple food options. What's great about Chicago is not only do you have this stuff inside, which almost nobody eats, you know, you can walk to 15 restaurants, you know, outside of the Rosemont Center or what's it called? It's not the Rosemont Center. It's the McCormick. No, that's the bigger one.
Yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't matter. In Chicago, it's not. You can go a lot.
It's the Donald Stevens Convention Center.
Stevens Convention
Yeah,
Center.
Stevens.
Thank you for.
I had to think about it for a second.
So here's the kind of bottom line question. We've thrown out a lot of things that were issues at Cleveland that aren't necessarily issues in Chicago. So I have two questions. What cities kind of have all of this figured out where you could do? We all know Chicago is one of them because we've experienced that. And these problems that we saw in Cleveland don't happen in Chicago by and large. There's still long lines. There's still the bathroom issues, and I've never seen it be an issue in Chicago. I'm trying to think what else. The food issue isn't as much of an issue because you can just walk somewhere. It's not necessarily, you know, perfect, but it's better than Cleveland. So many hotels, you know, that I must have spent well over $100 on Ubers throughout the week. I think between our group, the guys that we commonly shared Ubers with, we must have spent probably $300 or $400 total throughout the week.
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
And if I'm the national, I'm thinking, God, that's money that could be going to our dealers and giving them a better experience to make them and do that in aggregate, right? Not just our little group. You add all that up, it's a significant amount of money. And I must have lost in terms of time relative to Chicago, where I have the experience of walking across the street to my hotel. Hours throughout the week waiting on Ubers, driving to wherever destination I was going to. All of that, hours were lost on my week experience, sitting in a car or waiting for a car. And that's annoying.
Yeah, that's definitely annoying. And then, I mean, just think about like how much time the people that were waiting in those lines lost.
Sure.
Outside of the building, you know, like they could be inside spending money if they would just open up some more entrances, but instead they're standing outside.
Yeah, and you and I were lucky we didn't have to do that. So,
and it just sets a bad vibe with people. Like, if you're excited to go to this thing and then you get to the show and you have to stand in line for like an hour and a half,
or you're in your car trying to park for an hour, then you have to stand in line for an hour and a half, right?
Like by the time you actually get inside, you're kind of pissed already. So it's like, you know, you're kind of starting off bad with people, I think, whenever they have to wait in line like that. And I mean, I think the thing that you were talking about with it being in Chicago, what makes it such a great venue there is partly because it's not actually in Chicago, because you don't have to deal with all this traffic out there because you have all these people walking, everything's within walking distance. So you don't have all the parking issues, it doesn't seem like, because, you know, a lot of the people are just staying right there within walking distance. But yeah, there's just, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think Cleveland's kind of done as far as it goes.
I think Vegas is a natural solution to that. They are used to hosting conferences with way more people than the National Sports Collectors Convention.
Yeah.
You've got the convention center and every hotel known to man, right? Or all the places on the strip. It's just a lot more conducive to large crowds, and
You got cheap flights there all the time. So
cheap flights.
it does seem like an ideal place.
It does. So I think Chicago is still really good. Again, I think the National should use more of the square footage available in the Stevens Center to just, again, spread it out. If nothing else, spread out the dealers, spread out the everything.
Yeah.
And make it, even if it's 2 floors, last year they had the zigzagging. You had to kind of go which area. There were multiple areas. That was mildly annoying, but at least they were using more space.
Yeah.
And it was spreading people out. It was diluting the crowds, which on Thursday and Friday to me was the most busy day I've ever seen at a national. Was Friday. It was bonkers. Nuts.
I think too, like, this is one thing they could definitely do better. And this has nothing to do with this year's show. It has to do with all of them that I've ever attended. Like, their signage, as far as like the aisles and booths numbers, is horrendous. Like, you never know. Like, why can they not just have it posted somewhere at that booth what number it is? You never know. You always have to ask the dealer, like, what is your booth number?
And they do have them on. Some of them had kept their signs up, and you could tell, but it's so small. Why wouldn't they just tape it on the ground? Right. Yeah. And I think Chicago had that to some degree, but
it's very simple. Like, it seems like the only people that know the booth numbers are the dealer. And why do they need to know it? We're the ones that need to know.
Right. Because we want to come back and get a car.
Right. Yeah. It's, I mean, we're in 2024, and some of these things are just like, I mean, they should not be problems still.
Right.
Like, for anything this big. Like, some of this stuff is pretty easy to fix, and it's hard to imagine that, like, as far as some of these things, that like there wasn't somebody in the room that was like, hey, what about this? Because it seems pretty obvious, some of it, that it's like, if not a major problem, at least annoying to people enough that they can do something very easily about it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I was there at times where I couldn't even make a phone call. Right. And so internet and cell service, to me, it's you rent. There's got to be, and I'm not a tech guy, so somebody will put in the comments below, but some type of signal amplifiers around the room that help or create more bandwidth or something, knowing, again, you're going to have 50,000 people all looking at their phones. Like,
well,
think about that's going to happen, and what happens when people bitch about it not working.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can get Wi-Fi in there, but you have to pay like $50 a day.
Right. Thanks, but no thanks, right?
Yeah, I mean, like,
service is free, but it just may not work, right?
Yeah, maybe on some of that stuff, like, you just, try to make it a better experience for the people there and just give it to us for free. I don't know. That seems like maybe like some of the food places, maybe don't charge people $6 for a bottle of water.
Yeah, it was. I bought a burger and fries and a Mountain Dew, and it was $24.
Yeah.
And I went.
And it wasn't that good either, was it?
It wasn't that good. But those were the only options you had, It was that or not eat. But when I start thinking about all these things that make an ideal national, there's really not a lot of cities that can do that. I think New York City could do it, Vegas, Dallas could not do it based on the criteria that we've set forth. I don't think Dallas has even though they have multiple convention centers that are huge, there's not enough hotels within walking. You're still Ubering everywhere. You don't solve that problem.
I think with places like Dallas, and even if you start looking in California, like, you have to consider the traffic.
Yep.
And because like you said, you need a ton of hotels that are just right there within walking distance, because that's what people want. They don't want to have to drive all the time in this terrible traffic. Like, there's nothing you can do about the traffic existing, but you just want to, like, not have to deal with it.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm genuinely not, I had a great experience. I'm not going to remember after this video. I'm going to kind of put into my mental Rolodex of forgetting about all the negative stuff, but there is a huge benefit to convenience factor, right? And in Rosemont, you get that, it's totally that. And there are people that stay off site and have to drive and stuff, but they choose to do, or, there's a lot of opportunity for people to stay within walking distance kind of the whole week. I've had times where I've never even left that one square block.
Yeah.
For the whole national.
So the team that took over the national, this was their first time, right?
It was. And the Cleveland decision was made before they took it over.
Right. And what are the events that they ran prior to this? They did some, right?
The Philly show, Chantilly.
Yeah. So they've never probably dealt with something on this level. So I'm sure this is like a learning experience. Because I mean, honestly, I think both of you and I agree. I think that the facility itself was probably the biggest problem as far as the show itself goes.
Yeah,
there's not anything they could do about that. But I mean, even there are some things that they could have done to lessen it.
Yes.
And,
here's a
learning experience.
Here's a question for thought, and this will be the final thing we talk about. Is it possible? Did you ever think I would utter these words? But is it possible the National's too big?
I mean, if you're going to have it in a place like that, it is.
Right.
Yeah. It's very much. This was too big for that facility. I'll agree with that.
And I want the National to be a destination for collectors. I want it to be a place for us to all get together and kind of the annual meeting spot. And you can go to Dallas, you can go to Nashville, you can go to Burbank, you can go to Chantilly, you can go to Philly, you can go to all these different places. There's all these other shows. It's not the National. And yes, you can buy cards at all these places. You can go to Strongsville. All these things, those are all great in their own way. They're still not the National. No matter how much you try to convince me, you will never convince me that well, I can just do all that. I can go to 6 regional shows and essentially generate the same thing as the National. That's a bunch of BS. That's just not true, because not everybody goes to these other regional shows. And if you want to be at a place seeing so many friends, just like you and I got to all week, that's what I go for. The cards, yes, there are some cards there, and the competition breeds better deals. And, it's good to have the National. The National is a very, very good thing.
Yeah.
They need to find a bigger or more efficient use of a bigger space to do it in, more efficient, understanding the issues that have been highlighted and brought to light significantly through Cleveland to make the future ones even better.
Well, I think the irony of this whole thing is the attendance, we can both agree, was just off the charts, right? And, all I was hearing leading up to this show was like, there's a lot of people thinking, maybe there's not going to be as many people go this year. You got the Fanatics thing that's coming up in like 3 or 4 weeks. There's a lot of people not going to go to both. They'll just choose one or the other. And I mean, if that's the case, if they did choose one or another, I think we know which one they chose, because this was crazy as far as attendance.
I think the Fanatics show is going to do great. I think it's going to be kind of the talk of the hobby in a month whenever it happens.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for that. I'm glad that the hobby is big enough where it can support multiple giant events every year. The National may or may not be as big next year in Chicago. If it's growing if it continues to be as big of a deal as it has been growing over the last 3 or 4 years, even since COVID, Chicago is going to be a madhouse in a wonderful way. And they better some things need to get figured out before then, in anticipation of that, to make it a great experience for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I agree.
All right. If you have comments, please put them down below. Andy and I don't have all the answers. We're not, logistical geniuses over here, but we would love to hear what you have to think. In fact, great dialogue. Let's kind of think tank this as a way to how to be better and how to do things to make the hobby stronger and make people excited to go and give everybody the best experience possible. That's the point.
Yeah, I'd really like to hear like a lot of people's thoughts on some different places. Like, and I know like everybody has places that they would like it to be because it's closer for them or whatever, but I'd like to hear like some realistic places that could actually hold something like this. So if people have some ideas, yeah, throw them out there. It's fun to talk about. I mean, they're not listening to us, but you know,
They're not. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Andy.
thanks, Mike.
All right, guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Keep collecting.